King Guntram was hunting in the Vosges forest, his mind clear and his senses sharp. It was a crisp autumn day, the kind that promised a good hunt. The forest was alive with the sounds of wildlife, and the king, an avid hunter, was enjoying the thrill of the chase. But as he rode deeper into the woods, his enjoyment turned to anger. Suddenly, the king's hounds picked up a scent. They bounded ahead, barking excitedly. Guntram followed, his heart pounding with anticipation. But as he approached, he saw something that made his blood boil. There, on the ground, were the tracks of a wild ox tracks that clearly showed the animal had been killed. Who dares to hunt in my forest? Guntram roared, his voice echoing through the trees. The forester, a man who had served the king for years, stepped forward, trembling. "My lord, it was Chundo the chamberlain," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Chundo, the king's trusted chamberlain, had committed this act of defiance. Guntram's face twisted with rage. "Seize him, bring him to Chalon, bound and shackled," he ordered. Chundo was quickly apprehended and dragged before the king. In the presence of the court, the forester and Chundo argued bitterly. The forester insisted that Chundo was guilty, while Chundo claimed the accusations were groundless. The king, determined to see justice done, decided to settle the matter in a way that was both traditional and brutal. "Let there be a trial by combat," Guntram declared. Chundo, knowing he stood no chance, presented his nephew to fight on his behalf. The two men stepped onto the field, weapons in hand. The young nephew threw his lance with all his might, piercing the forester's foot. The forester fell, but the nephew, sensing victory, rushed forward to finish the job. He drew his sword, but in a moment of desperation, the forester struck back, stabbing the nephew in the belly. Both men fell, their lives bleeding away on the grass. Chundo, seeing his nephew's lifeless body, tried to escape. He ran toward the Basilica of St. Marcellus, hoping the holy ground would protect him. But Guntram, his anger reaching a boiling point, shouted for his men to stop the chamberlain. Chundo was caught before he could reach the sanctuary, bound to a post and stoned to death. The king's swift and harsh justice left a deep mark on the court. Guntram later felt a wave of regret, realizing that his anger had led him to punish a loyal servant for a minor offense. But the damage was done, and the memory of that day would haunt him for years to come. As the court settled into a tense silence, the king's thoughts turned to the future. He knew that the realm needed a ruler who could balance justice and mercy, but the weight of his decision hung heavy on his heart. The forest, once a place of pleasure, now held a dark shadow, a reminder of the price of rashness. The city of Clermont was buzzing with news. St. Gallus, the beloved bishop, had passed away. His body was washed and carried into the church, where many came to pay their respects. But even as the community mourned, a new struggle for power began. A priest named Cato saw this as his chance to become the next bishop. He quickly gained the support of the church clergy. Confident that he would be chosen, Cato started acting as if he already had the position. He took control of all the church's property, dismissing the people who managed it and firing the officials. He made changes to how things were run, doing everything his own way. But not everyone was happy with Cato's sudden rise to power. Another priest, Cottinus, also had his eye on the bishop's role. Cottinus believed he was the better choice and started to gather support among the people of Clermont. The city was divided. Some sided with Cato, praising his quick action and leadership. Others backed Cottinus, thinking he would be a fairer and more suitable bishop. The tension between the two priests and their supporters grew, making the already sad time even more difficult for the community. As the days passed, the rivalry between Cato and Cottinus became a major issue. The people of Clermont found themselves caught in the middle, unsure who to trust and who would truly lead them well. The church, which should have been a place of peace and comfort, was now a battleground for power and control. In the small town of Saints, a storm was brewing. The bishop of the city, Emirius, had been deposed by Leontius, the metropolitan bishop of Bordeaux, and other bishops. They claimed Emirius had not followed the proper rules to become bishop. Emirius had a directive from King Clothar allowing him to be consecrated without the consent of the metropolitan, but that didn't stop Leontius and the others from deposing him. Emirius was forced out of his office, and the bishops chose Heraclius, a priest from Bordeaux, to take his place. They wrote a document called a consensus, which was like a letter signed by all the bishops, and sent Heraclius with it to King Charibert. Heraclius first went to Tours to get the signature of Bishop Euphronius, a respected and holy man. But Euphronius refused to sign, knowing that what the bishops had done was wrong. Heraclius then traveled to Paris and met with King Charibert. He greeted the king, saying, "Greetings, glorious king. An apostolic see sends your eminence best wishes." King Charibert was confused. "Have you been to Rome, then, that you bring us greetings from its pope?" he asked. "It is your father Leontius, who, together with the bishops of his province, sends you greetings," Heraclius explained. "They have deposed Amirius from his position because he did not follow the rules. They have chosen Heraclius to be the new bishop, and they want you to approve it." King Charibert was furious. "What do you think no son of King Clothar is around to uphold the actions of his father just because these people have, without my consent, cast out a bishop whom my father chose?" he roared. The king ordered Heraclius to be dragged away, placed in a wagon full of thorns, and exiled. He sent messengers to restore Amirius to his position, and to punish Leontius and the other bishops who had deposed him. The king wanted to make sure that no one could undermine his father's authority. Meanwhile, in Clermont, the city was in turmoil after the death of Bishop Cottinus. Many people wanted to become the new bishop, and they offered bribes to the king to gain the position. One of them was Euphrasius, a priest who was known for his charming manners but questionable actions. He tried to buy the bishopric by sending expensive gifts to the king, but the king saw through his schemes. The archdeacon Avitus, a man of good character, was chosen by the people of Clermont to be the new bishop. Avitus didn't promise anything to the clergy or the king, but he was still chosen. When he went to see the king, some of Avitus's enemies tried to bribe the king to delay his consecration, but the king refused. The king held Avitus in high regard and ordered his consecration to take place in his presence. Avitus was consecrated at Metz, and the king was so pleased that he said, "May the first deserve to receive the blessed bread from his hands." Avitus became a great bishop, providing justice to the people, support to the poor, and assistance to widows and orphans. He was a true leader, and the people of Clermont were grateful for his guidance. In Le Mans, the story was different. Bishop Bodigisel, who had been appointed by King Chilperic, was an exceptionally cruel man. He unjustly seized people's property and was always involved in disputes. His wife Magnatrude was even worse. She advised him to commit terrible crimes and was known for her brutal treatment of people, including cutting off the genitals of male slaves and burning the private parts of female slaves with red-hot metal plates. Bodigisel died after 5 years in office, and Bertram, an archdeacon from Paris, was appointed to replace him. Bertram had many disputes with Magnatrude, who refused to return church property that had been given during her husband's episcopacy. Eventually, she had to give it back, though she did so unwillingly. In 591, a man named Fermad, who was not from the local aristocracy, became the Bishop of Paris. This was unusual, as the episcopacy was often reserved for the local elite. Fermad, known in Parisian records as Eusebius, proved that even an outsider could rise to the position of bishop if he had the right qualities and support. In the city of Paris, a great change came when Bishop Ragnamod passed away. His brother, Fermad, a priest, thought he would become the new bishop. But a merchant named Eusebius, who was born in Syria, had other plans. Eusebius gave many gifts to those in power, and managed to get the position instead. Once he became bishop, Eusebius dismissed all of Ragnamod's followers and replaced them with Syrians just like himself. The cathedral household was now full of Eusebius's people. Not far from Paris, in the city of Tours, a man named Desiderius appeared in 587. Desiderius claimed he was a great man, and that he could perform wonders. He said he could heal the sick, and even that he was equal to the apostles Peter and Paul. Many peasants believed him, and brought their sick to be healed. But Desiderius's methods were cruel and deceptive. He would have people stretch out the sick, causing them great pain, and claim he was healing them. When the sick didn't get better, they were left to die. Desiderius was a fraud, and his tricks were exposed. He was arrested and expelled from the city. A few years earlier, in 580, another deceiver appeared. He wore a short-sleeved tunic and a fine mantle, and carried a cross with ampullas, claiming they contained holy oil. He said he was from Spain, and had relics of the martyrs Vincent and Felix. When he arrived at the Basilica of St. Martin, it was late, and I told him to leave the relics until the morning. But he was impatient and came to my cell at dawn, demanding a better welcome. He was rude and boastful, and I had him arrested and sent to Paris. In Paris, the bishop, Ragnamod, was leading a procession during the public rogations. The deceiver joined the procession, wearing his strange outfit, and trying to visit the holy places with his own followers. The bishop's archdeacon told him to place his relics in the basilica and wait, but the deceiver cursed the bishop and was arrested. When they searched his belongings, they found roots, mole teeth, mouse bones, and bear claws, clear signs of witchcraft. The bishop ordered everything thrown into the river, and the deceiver expelled from Paris. I was in Paris at the time, staying at the Basilica of St. Julian. One night, the deceiver, still in chains, broke out of his prison and came to the basilica. He fell asleep on the floor, drunk and stinky. We found him in the middle of the night, and had to carry him to a corner because the smell was so bad. The next day, I handed him over to the bishop again. Later, when bishops gathered in Paris, I told them about the deceiver. One of the bishops recognized him as a runaway servant and took him back. The deceiver was just one of many who tried to deceive people with false miracles and claims of holiness. In 591, a terrible disease and famine spread through Gaul. In the province of Marseille, a man from Bourges went mad after being attacked by flies in a forest. He traveled to Arles, dressed in animal hides, and pretended to be a holy man. The devil gave him the power of divination, and he began to heal the sick and distribute wealth to the poor. He even claimed to be Christ, and had a woman with him named Mary. Thousands of people followed him, including priests. He threatened bishops and citizens who refused to worship him. He and his followers attacked the city of La Velle, but the bishop Aurelius sent men to stop them. The false Christ was killed, and his followers were scattered. There was also a woman who had the spirit of Pytho, a kind of demon, and could predict the future. She made a lot of money for her masters by revealing thieves and solving mysteries. When she was freed, she continued to make money by pretending to be a holy woman. Bishop Ageric of Verdun discovered her and tried to exorcise the demon, but it didn't work. She fled to Queen Fredegund for protection. In 576, my brother Peter, a deacon in Langers, got into trouble with a bishop named Felix. Felix accused Peter of killing a bishop to get the bishopric. Felix was greedy and wanted a villa that belonged to the church. When I refused to give it to him, he wrote me a letter full of insults. I replied, telling him that his greed was like those who join house to house and field to field. Felix was a man of incredible greed and boastfulness. At that time, the bishop of Langers, Tetricus, was getting old and had dismissed a deacon named Lampadius. My brother Peter helped the poor who Lampadius had wronged, which made Lampadius hate him. When Tetricus had a stroke, the clergy asked for a new bishop named Munderic. Munderic was made bishop, but exiled to a tower on the Rhone for 2 years because he helped King Sigibert. He later returned to Lyons and then fled to Sigibert's realm, where he became the bishop of Alais. The parishes he governed were once held by the Goths but were now under Dalmatius, the bishop of Rhodes. These stories show how people in power, both in the church and outside, could be greedy, deceitful, and cruel. But they also show how the Lord often brought swift justice to those who did wrong. The story of the people of Langers and the conflicts they faced is a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the quest for justice. When Munderic was gone, the people of Langers turned to Sylvester, a relative of the blessed Tetricus, to become their bishop. However, Sylvester's journey to this role was marred by tragedy. His brother initiated the request, but soon after, Tetricus passed away. Sylvester was tonsured, ordained, and given control of the church's property. He prepared to travel to Lyons for his episcopal consecration, but was struck by a severe epileptic attack and died. Sylvester's death left a void, and the community's grief was deepened by the accusations that followed. His son, young and easily influenced, was convinced by Lampadius, a man who had lost his position and means, that Peter the deacon had killed Sylvester through witchcraft. The young man, driven by hatred and grief, publicly accused Peter. Peter, determined to clear his name, sought a hearing before Bishop Nistius of Lyons, his mother's uncle. In the presence of other bishops and leaders, Peter swore an oath, proving his innocence. 2 years later, the young man, still harboring his anger, caught up with Peter and killed him with a spear. Peter's body was taken to Dijon and buried next to St. Gregory, their great-grandfather. The young man, now a fugitive, fled to King Chilperic, leaving behind his property to King Guntram's treasury. His life, however, was not to be a peaceful one. Haunted by guilt, he eventually killed an innocent man and was himself killed by the man's relatives, a just judgment, it seemed, for his crimes. After these tumultuous events, Langers finally found a new bishop, Papalis. Gregory, the narrator, chooses not to dwell on Papilus's misdeeds, but mentions that he died not long after taking office. Following Papalis, Mammalus, known for his virtue and charity, became bishop. He took a strong stand against Lampadius, who had fraudulently taken church property and stripped him of his ill-gotten gains. Lampadius, once wealthy, was now reduced to poverty and had to earn his living through manual labor. The story of the matron in Paris is another tale of scandal and violence. A woman was accused of leaving her husband and having an affair. Her father, to clear her name, took an oath at the burial place of St. Denis. The situation escalated, and a violent confrontation broke out at the altar, leading to bloodshed and the suspension of the liturgy. The king, upon hearing of the incident, ordered the parties to appear before the Bishop of Paris. They paid compensation and were readmitted to the church. The matron, unable to bear the pressure, took her own life. In Tours, the feud between Sichar and Cramnesinde is a dark chapter of betrayal and revenge. Sichar, after a series of conflicts, killed Cramnesinde's relatives. Despite this, they later formed a friendship. One night, while drunk, Sichar boasted about his crimes, which pushed Cramnesinde to kill him. Cramnesinde, seeking justice, went to the king but faced the queen's wrath for killing a man under her protection. He fled to the Vosges district, where he found some safety. Sichar's wife, left with nothing, remarried and moved away. The story of Eulalius and Tetradia is one of accusation and redemption. Eulalius, accused of killing his mother, was excommunicated but later cleared by the bishop. He married Tetradia, but his mistreatment of her and his debts led to her seeking refuge with Desiderius. When Eulalius tried to reclaim her and her property, a synod of bishops was convened. The outcome was a judgment that Eulalius must prove his innocence, and he was eventually allowed to take communion, a sign of his redemption. These stories, though filled with conflict and tragedy, also show moments of justice and the human capacity for forgiveness and redemption. They remind us that even in the darkest times, the pursuit of truth and the desire for peace can lead to healing and a better future.